I'm attorney Andrew Thomas. Welcome to The Deposition. This is a new show we're going to be doing primarily on YouTube that's going to be highlighting the legal changes that we see in the law and current events as we go forward. We're going to be featuring a lot of guests. We have some lined up, from attorneys that we work with to outsiders that have questions and stuff that we want to know answers to. So thanks for joining us. Let's get right into it. So a little bit about my background. I've been an attorney for over 20 years. I was doing commercial litigation for a very long time, switched into immigration over a decade ago, and now we run this firm here in Texas that has reaches all over the United States. We help people that are not only facing deportation from the US with their families, trying to help keep them together, keep them here in the United States to help them realize their American dream, but also people that are seeking permanent residency, work permits, even up to citizenship here in the United States. We know there's a lot of people that want to come to this country. Understandably so. This is a great country, a lot of things to offer, and a lot of things that people can offer to this country. So we help facilitate those things to try to make those dreams a reality. So I went to law school a long time ago. Might not look like it, might look like it, but I did. Went to law school. I worked really hard when I was in law school. I got a scholarship when I was in law school based on academics. So I first went to undergrad here in Dallas, got a full scholarship for my academics, was able to graduate pretty high in my class with honors, went to law school, very good law school, was able to get a scholarship and also graduated with honors from law school. When I was coming out, it was a different time. And in those days, some law firms would recruit lawyers directly out of law school. They still do this now, but to a much lesser extent. Just a lot more lawyers out there, a lot more law schools. Things have exploded in the last 20 years. But I went from Texas to Arkansas to law school. After that, all the way to Miami, Florida for my first job. I'd never even been to Miami, Florida, but I took the job, I took the risk to go out there and start practicing in something that I wanted to practice in, which was litigation. And for everybody out there, that is trial work. So obviously, starting as a young attorney, they have these billable hours requirements. That's what I started doing. It's just grinding. That's essentially what it is. I started in a very big law firm, a very prominent law firm in Florida in their downtown Miami offices, where I started working in trial work representing corporate clients. So these are mostly Fortune 500 companies that would find themselves in a lawsuit a lot of times, legal disputes and things like that. There'd be a team of lawyers that we would work on cases together. So typically, I'd have a case where I'd be working with partners at the law firm, lawyers that were several years ahead of me, that had a lot more experience than I had at the time. And I would be learning under them. And we'd be doing a lot of the work, a lot of the legal research, a lot of the writing. We'd be sitting in on depositions, sometimes sitting in on hearings. Eventually, we'd work our way into handling more and more complicated and complex legal issues. The first case I was able to work on, I was very lucky. It was a case that went all the way to the US Supreme Court. Now, again, I wasn't handling these hearings. I wasn't up at the top. I was just at the bottom doing these legal research and writing. Provided extremely valuable lessons to me in how the legal practice worked, but how some of the top lawyers in the country would operate on a day-to-day basis and how they would help to ensure success and put their clients in position to have success in these legal hearings and these legal cases. So those things provided valuable insight to me. From there, I went to another very large law firm. This one was more of a national and even international presence, much larger. At the time of their peak of this law firm I worked in, they had over 300 offices all over the world. There was over 1,000 lawyers. So again, similar type of work. We'd work with corporate clients that find themselves defending themselves in lawsuits from legal disputes and things like that. We're talking multi-million-dollar cases, up to $1 billion cases, very, very complex legal disputes that, again, I was working on, handling much higher level work than I did at the previous firm. Obviously, years had gone by, I'd had experience, and I got into that. Well, eventually, I wanted to come back to Texas. This is where my family's from. I was born and raised in Texas. I'm a Texan. So I wanted to come back here. And so your options at that point are, do you want to continue on your path and try to be in these larger law firms and try to work your way up to partner, which is a great path for a lot of lawyers? Or do you want to start your own office? That's what I decided to do. Try to start my own office. So I started just me, solo attorney, picking up cases. Very different world there, because mostly instead of being on the defense side, when you're a plaintiff's attorney, you're going to be on the plaintiff's side, right? When you're a solo attorney, you're no longer in the defense thing where they want a big legal team. It's more like the one attorney against the other side. So I was picking up plaintiff's cases, so a lot of personal injury, some family law cases, things like that. Well, one day we started getting immigration clients coming into our office, and I was talking to them. I had some friends that worked in the ICE with ICE attorneys, immigration enforcement. So I was able to glean some insight as to how these things worked. I was able to observe some immigration hearings and start to understand how these things worked, how these administrative type hearings worked. So I took on some clients, and I started representing them. And I found that my skills as a trial attorney translated very well into being able to represent the respondents in these hearings. And as we started having success, obviously we got referrals. Immigration is a great deal of referral type business. You help someone's family member, all of a sudden other family members start coming in facing similar issues. They would come in and seek our services, and it kind of snowballed from there. So we became, from a solo attorney practicing, handling a lot of different types of hearings, mostly litigation type hearings, personal injury, family law, things in front of a judge, some immigration, to majority immigration. And that happened in a relatively quick period of time, just based on the success I was having in court. And that has grown over the years. We're talking now 12 years or so we've been doing immigration, to having multiple offices here in Texas, having up to 10 attorneys at our firm working at any point, working on immigration court cases, working on residency cases and things like that. To now we have a reach, again, all across the United States. We help people everywhere because we are licensed to practice in federal law, which means we can practice in all jurisdictions in the United States. That's where we find ourselves now. Now, immigration is a unique field. And the reason why I say that is that we all know that this is a highly politicized field. There are constant changes in this field. You cannot stay static when you are practicing in this law. You've got to be up to date, because with every new administration comes new policy changes and things that just have a seismic impact on your clients and your practice of law. So we just had a new president, obviously inaugurated last month. With this has brought very, very big changes to immigration law. Now, we've been well positioned to understand what these changes are going to be. We've anticipated it because we have a 4-year track record already of President Trump being in office from 2016 to 2020. And what we're seeing now is a lot of the same stuff. Some of it's accelerated, but we understood what was going to happen ever since the election, and we've been prepared for it to see what's going to take place in the future. Some of the biggest changes that we see affect clients that are facing immigration court. That is the first thing that I would point to when people ask me, what are the changes you're seeing? So, immigration court now. No longer are the days that we can come to simple agreements with the prosecution. So obviously, you have the Department of Homeland Security, the ICE attorneys who are looking to enforce these cases and prosecute and try to secure these deportation orders. Well, the previous 4 years, we were able to work out some deals for certain clients who had a pathway to residency, say, or had other factors in their background that would allow them to stay in the United States under some kind of a legal status or even a work permit, seeking a green card, possibly up to citizenship. And we could work out an agreement for the ICE attorney to drop their prosecution. We'd come to some kind of a joint agreement that the immigration judge could sign and allow our clients to get out of immigration court and pursue their life here in the United States. Those days are over. Mostly now, no agreements are to be had between ICE attorneys and immigration attorneys, the respondents' counsel, such as us. Now, there are some limited circumstances where maybe this could go on, but this comes from the very top. The very top is immigration enforcement priorities have changed, where now every case is considered a priority, meaning they do not want to drop the prosecution for any of these cases. This has led to a lot of different things that we need to do and prepare our clients for as they're facing immigration court, whether that be their preliminaries, their master calendar hearings, all the way up through their individual hearings, where they're actually putting on evidence and testimony in front of the immigration judge and trying to have their applications approved. There's also some other changes that are in immigration law outside of court. We know that temporary protected status is starting to be rescinded for certain types of countries. Temporary protected status, or TPS, is a type of status that allows some immigrants from affected countries to be in the United States under a temporary basis while conditions in their countries remain a certain way. You know, prominent ones that we know about: Venezuela, El Salvador, Haiti. These types of countries are starting to see their TPS be affected by this new administration. Again, presidents and their attorney generals and the head of ICE, Department of Homeland Security, have a great deal to say on who and who is not allowed temporary protected status. Now, there are court challenges going on, but this is affecting a lot of people here in the United States and affecting a lot of people who want to come to the United States. One of the big headlines we saw right off the bat when President Trump got into office was his attempt to rescind birthright citizenship. This is something protected by the 14th Amendment. And we've all seen the headlines where he signed an executive order saying no longer would it be just anybody born in the United States would automatically be considered a U.S. citizen, as had been the case under the Constitution and under case law. However, that was immediately challenged in the district courts. We knew this was going to happen. And now a restraining order, a TRO, has been issued against his executive order. So it's not in place now, but it is in the courts where they are fighting to change the definition of what the 14th Amendment says and allows. I want to make an important point when we talk about the news and what you're seeing on TV, what you're hearing on your podcasts, what you're hearing on the radio, is that don't always believe your eyes and your ears when you're seeing reporting. A lot of time news outlets are A, they either have an agenda that they're trying to push on you, or B, they just don't have a full understanding of these issues when they're presenting them to you. So immigration law, yes, it's undergoing a lot of changes, but we also know that the news doesn't always get it right. So they will highlight certain stories. I would say they're more of anecdotes than they are widespread, but you need to make sure that you are fact checking and understanding what is happening on a national level and what is happening as priorities of the administration and what they can and can't do as opposed to what they want to do. Okay. So it's always important to fact check and do your own research. And if you have questions about your case or how it's going to affect you, nothing beats talking to a qualified expert about your case or your situation, because just because you see something on the news doesn't mean it's going to affect you or your family. You could be in a very different situation than what you're seeing on TV from somebody or what you're hearing on the radio. So be very careful about the stuff you're consuming. So one important thing we want to do on this show is we're going to answer questions that we get every week. And we get hundreds of them. So we're going to pick out some of them we think are going to apply to a lot of people. So one of the first ones we have is, should you wait to apply for citizenship given the new administration and the changes you see? And the answer is no, you should not. You should definitely move forward with your N-400 application for naturalization. This is a process that is not affected in any way by who is in the presidential office. If you can find a way to become a U.S. citizen and take yourself out of the immigration system, by all means, you should definitely do it. There's so many benefits that go into being a United States citizen. I don't need to go into them all here, but the main one is that you are now out of the immigration system and no longer subject to possible deportation proceedings or anything else, or having to renew any immigration status. It is a great process. We do not see this process affected, and we don't see any other USCIS processes affected. So if you are on the fence and thinking whether you should or should not apply, go for it. If you have an appointment at a consulate, should you travel for that appointment? And again, the answer is most likely yes. Again, this is not a process that's going to be affected by the president or his administration. Now, there are some important things to understand when you're talking about a process where you have to leave the United States to go to an interview. So number one, you want to make sure that you filed all of the proper paperwork before you get that interview and you attend it outside the country. This can include things like an I-130. It can include things like a waiver, possibly a 601A, which is a provisional unlawful presence waiver. You want to make sure you have those in place if you need them and have them approved before setting up and attending your interview outside the country. If you've done all of those things and you're confident that you have approvals in place and you've talked to a qualified immigration attorney, then you should have no fear in returning to your country and going to the interview. That's, again, not something that's going to be affected by the president or his administration. What is the current status of DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals? Well, nothing has changed, again, since the new president's entered office. What we have to understand is that DACA has been challenged in court for years. Now, the recent rulings are against DACA, showing it's been outlawed. However, the court has punted. They're allowing current DACA holders to continue to renew their DACA as this court procedure plays out. Ultimately, it's probably going to land in the United States Supreme Court. We'll have the ultimate say on it. But while it's there, if you have DACA, you should continue to renew it. Now, what happens if your DACA has expired? Well, if it's expired after a certain point, unfortunately, they will treat your DACA like a new application, which means it is barred from being filed. They'll reject it. You can't get it again. This is why it's very important to keep it up to date. If your DACA has expired, again, after a certain point, you can no longer get a work permit. You can no longer get DACA. You can't renew it. They don't allow new applications. So keep it current. If you're in a process for residency and you have DACA, keep renewing that DACA until you actually have that green card in your hand. It's very important. If you want to see your question answered or your comment answered, make sure to send it on these videos because we're going to be answering these every week as we move forward. Okay, so from time to time, I'm asked to comment on issues not only in immigration, but outside of immigration that may touch on some legal topic. And these are always social media driven. This one we found on TikTok that was sent to us several times. My man Frankie's talked to me about it, so I looked into it a little bit. And we're talking about, of course, the Trevino versus Camila legal issues that are apparently going on after a podcast was filmed. Now, apparently there's lawsuits being bandied about because of some disputed fees. From my understanding of it is that Camila invited Trevino to come out to her, paid for her hotel, paid for her flight, her expenses to produce this podcast. And from what I understand, there was not a contract in place. That was the nature of the deal. And she came out there, filmed the podcast, went away. Now, apparently this podcast did very well. And based on that, the creator of the podcast, Camila, started receiving some money for this. And now, obviously, Trevino feels she should get some of those proceeds. Should have had a contract in place because likely, unless I'm not seeing something here, she's not going to be entitled to any of those fees. All the risk there was being taken by the actual creator of the show. She obviously went out of pocket to bring in a guest, not knowing how this podcast was going to do, not knowing how many views it's going to do. That's unforeseeable. That's not something that a contract protected because there was no contract in place. So whatever money came from that goes to the creator. So all I can say, Trevino, good luck with your lawsuits if indeed you found a lawyer to actually take that case. Thanks for joining us today on The Deposition. I'm attorney Andrew Thomas. Subscribe here for more. We're going to have some very interesting guests and answer your questions every week. See you guys.